All right, so today we're going to talk about starting a vegetable garden, which there's a lot of basic information involved in that, and it's gonna I'm gonna kind of nail it at you. I'm trying to make it as entertaining as I can. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. I'm happy to hear them and try to make things a little more clear where I maybe skipped over something. So what is a vegetable garden? Growing vegetables, either for subsistence, which is totally feeding your whole family on it, or supplemental, which is generally what we're going to be talking about, which is just a few things, buy your romaine, grow your romaine of heads of romaine rather than buying them from the store. It is much easier than you might think, so I like to encourage people to not be discouraged because it's just get your hands dirty. You'll be surprised what you can make happen. It's also really great for your mental and physical health. Um, I'm getting a question, would I share my slides after this meeting? This whole video will be uploaded to YouTube in a matter of days, and that will be the easiest way to probably reference. If you'd like, you could always email me too, and I'll see what I can do for sharing. So where do we want to grow our vegetable garden? We're really looking ideally at full sun. A lot of these things are going to need 6, 8 hours of direct sunlight to be able to produce fully for you. In our summers here in the Willamette Valley, we have a really semi-short growing period before the rain starts setting in, before the cold hits. So our vegetables really have to do a lot of work for us in the main growing season. You want to use in-ground planting if you've got the space, raised beds, they're kind of nice for drainage and helping your back out a little bit. If you're like me, you're going to be using a lot of container gardening because you don't have the land, you're maybe renting and want to take everything with you when you go. Greenhouses are really nice for early and late starting or winter growing. Really use whatever you got. This picture down below is a real picture of someone's garden where they just had one of those back patio areas and they managed to grow mass amount of vegetables in their tiny little space. So what we're going to be looking at is vegetables, clearly vegetable gardening. We're going to break them down into annuals and perennials. Annuals is generally what we're looking at for our summer gardening period. Your lettuces, radish, broccoli, chard, peas, and kale. Things that are going to kind of die back when the growing season is done and won't come back, likely. The perennials are things like artichoke, asparagus, rhubarb, horseradish, things that live in your garden for long periods of time. You'll see them pop back out of dormancy springtime going into summer. When? Really, anytime. I keep talking about summer like it's our main growing season. It is because it's hot, but you can grow vegetables any season of the year. Right now in spring, you're planting for summer harvests. We're still kind of in our frost zone. So I know this week was incredibly warm. 70 degrees is kind of outrageous, but um, we might still see some nights of frost. And that's something to be aware of when you're handling with sensitive plant material, little babies. In the summertime, you're going to be doing a lot of your planting for fall harvests. These plants are going to be really heat tolerant, if not heat loving, like tomatoes and melons and squash. Uh, in the fall, you're going to be planting the winter crops, which again need to be frost tolerant. We're going to look at them to overwinter through our harsh winters for a winter or a spring harvest. So let's first talk about spring summer crops. These are a lot of the things you're going to be actively seeing right now and the things you can get your hands dirty in on pretty much immediately. I've got these little asterisks here. One asterisk can be direct seeded mid-March. Two asterisks can be seeded late January, early February. So right now you can be getting started on your potatoes, peas, radishes, beets, carrots. All of these things are a little cold hardy for this beginning period. The rest of them, you're going to want to, if you're getting started on them, you're going to want to be starting them indoors for transplanting to give them a little bit more of a stronger start. This is an example of what your bed might look like at this period. You can see cabbages, kales, and violas and pansies. Summer fall crops, again, you're really heat-loving crops. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, squash, greens, beans, melons, and corn. Here in the Willamette Valley, our last hard frost day is April 15th. That's around 28 degrees. That's when the ground will still get pretty cold, and your plants will be unhappy at that point. But you can push it if you'd like, because the last light frost that we can expect is May 15th. So that's kind of a transition period in between the frost periods that you can push it if you'd like. But if you want to play it safe, really just wait a little bit longer. The heat-loving crops with the asterisks next to them on this page really would rather be planted later when it's really warm. May 15th to June. It'll feel a little hard to put the brakes on and on your tomatoes and stuff, but if you were to start a set at that period, or like now, you started them now, or it, and then waited until it actually got warm out and then put another tomato of the same size in, you'd actually see that warm weather tomato kind of probably outdo the other one just because they love the heat. These are vegetables that we love to eat in the summer. We sell a lot of these gallon sized, you'll see those. So if you didn't want to do your starts, you can always buy a foot long plant from us here at Shonnard's.
So the ones that are already in the container, like that picture of your tomatoes, you could plant them now because I'm starting to see them out.
They're gonna want to be protected. So tomatoes are incredibly heat loving. You put them out now, they're gonna struggle. If you have a greenhouse, that's an exception to where you can start to push it a little bit. Fall winter crops that we love to see: garlics, onions, shallots, leeks. All of these things are incredibly cold hardy, and some of them will overwinter for spring harvest. There's not a lot of really great growing days through our winter time, so they really take advantage of our random sunny days. If we do end up getting a few days of really great weather during our winter time, that's a good time to maybe think about liquid fertilizing. Say your garlic now is a really great time to be liquid fertilizing garlic because it's still a little cold, but 70-degree weather every once in a while. They do a lot of growing with that little bit of window they're allowed. So my goals and my focus of today is to really try to help create a strong basic foundation of your understanding of the vegetable garden. We'll be focusing mostly on the annual vegetables that will switch over with the different seasons. I'm gonna include tips and tricks on how to navigate the early climate and weather of our area and help you feel more confident on getting maybe a little earlier season of a start. talk a little bit more about the transition from winter crops into these spring and summer crops. And to do this, we will be discussing starting seeds indoors versus direct seeding, or starting seeds versus transplanting. We'll try to go over a little bit of everything. So right now, I've included these pictures right here, because this is kind of what this transition at this moment is going to look like. So these are colder season crops in here. Gosh, this little bar keeps showing up on my screen, sorry. And this is, we're going to be going into still a little bit cooler season, like your peas and your kale there. At this point, if you wait a couple weeks, you can start your seeds now, wait a couple weeks and get your start more warm, loving crops in then. So where do I start? I really recommend planning. Any little bit of planning you can give yourself, you'll be doing yourself a favor, as you can maximize the use of your area, maximize your yield and productivity while minimizing the amount of effort that you have to put in. After all, we have to enjoy working in our gardens. So take note of your space. Think about your sun availability, where you have more sun in your garden, where you have less. Full sun, you're obviously going to want to plant your sun-loving crops, your tomatoes, strawberries, squashes, melons. Your leafy greens can kind of get pushed maybe over into little shadier regions. How much space do you have for these mature plants? They grow. They grow a lot. And when you look at them in those tiny little 6-pack trays, they're just so tiny. You're like, why would it recommend planting it 3 feet apart? Well, you'll know by the end of the summer why. Um, where are you growing? This is going to influence how you tackle your vegetable garden a lot. Are you going to be using containers, raised beds, greenhouse, in-ground gardening? What kind of work do you have to do before you can get started? And you got to make sure that you can water this thing in the summertime, whether that be by hand. Can you huff your little watering cans from the spigot, or are you going to have to set up some sort of irrigation system for yourself so that you can leave on vacation in the dead of summer or not worry about having to water consistently through the summer? Because it's a real deal once that heat starts to set in. Figure out what you want to grow. What's important to you? What can you handle, space and labor? When and how often would you like to harvest? How much do you want to eat? Would you rather do perennials or would you rather do annuals? Put a little more effort in for a more continual harvest. And staggered planting is also something you can consider, seed every week so that you can harvest your lettuce every week is something you can think about doing. I also recommend crop rotation, especially if you're doing raised bed gardening or gardening for a long period of time in the same space of soil. If you're doing container gardening, you can just kind of toss out your soil, put in new stuff. But your raised beds and your native soil needs to be consistently worked and thought about, so you're not depleting what's available to your plants and that you're just adding into your soil to make it better and better over time. So to talk a little bit more about crop rotations, we're going to talk about the families of the main vegetables in the garden. So there's 6 major families in the vegetable garden. There's more than that, but I am only going to talk about 6 today. You want to do crop rotation for your soil health and pest disease management. It's not, it's not black and white, It's not you're going to do this so you can prevent getting that is the idea, but it's not like if I don't do this, I'm going to get it. Like if you plant your tomatoes in the same spot every year, the bugs that eat your tomatoes are going to know I can find a tomato there every year. And tomatoes, they're going to eat the same thing out of that soil every year. And eventually they're going to just deplete the soil of what it likes to eat from the levels it can eat. And tomatoes in particular can have some pretty bad diseases that can be soil borne and live in the soil. So by doing crop rotations, it's just a prevention of any issues you may see, and any thought that you can put into it is helpful for your garden and your soil. So first we're going to talk about the Asteraceae. Also, don't mind my pronunciation. I'm terrible at it, but we're going to give it a go. So the daisy family is easier to say. Here you'll find your lettuces, your artichokes, and sunflowers. Uh, your It might sound a little funny, like, well, how is lettuce and sunflower a part of the same family? Well, you'll notice their key characteristics when they start to bolt or flower in your garden, and you can kind of see how the heads of those flowers seem very similar. It's very daisy-like. This family has the highest number of species in all the plant families, so you're going to find many weeds in the garden with the same family. Brassicaceae is your broccoli family, your cabbages, mustards, radish, rutabaga, and turnip. The really, really cool thing about the broccoli, there's a couple of really cool things about the broccoli family, but is their fumigative qualities in the garden. So if you think about broccoli, you can kind of think about how smelly it is. And pests notice that too. When the cell walls of these plants are ruptured, it releases toxins and smells into the garden that the pests, fungi, bacteria, nematodes, and weeds don't like. So a lot of farms will use this intentionally in their crop rotations. One of their main characteristics are their swollen taproots and herbaceous woody stems. This allows them to be hardier in the cold, you'll find. So these are all really great winter plants. They also have really intense root systems, so they do really great for breaking up compaction and stuff. The cucurbits, whoa, I hit the wrong button. Cucurbits, the gourd family, cucumbers, melons, squashes, and pumpkins. You can kind of tell they all kind of grow the same way. They're characterized by their trailing vines and their climbing tendrils. They have a large vegetative mass that can be used to shade out weeds in the garden. That's one of the few intentional thoughts behind them. Another thought is they are very heavy feeders with high water needs as they produce extremely large fruits. So it's a good idea to plant them after light feeders like your carrots and your leafy greens, or after nitrogen fixers like your legumes. Then we'll talk a little more about legumes. The legume family, beans, peas, and peanuts. It's a good idea to use these in the guys in the garden before and after heavy feeding plants, or after. They create really neat root systems with rhizomes that have nitrogen fixing bacteria and fungi in them, which doesn't sound very interesting to us, but it is incredibly great for the soil. So a lot of people will just till in their legumes right into their soil, just let them be some organic material into your soil. The roots are really what you want to keep in there because that's what's doing all this hard work. It takes nitrogen from like the air and converts it into usable material in the soil for plants, for future plants. So it has a really amazing place in the garden. The garden and legumes, 2 peas in a pod. So the tomato and the nightshade family is one to really pay attention to. These are your potatoes, eggplants, and peppers. They tend to be pretty sensitive to viral diseases and pests. This is why we really use good crop rotation, particularly for this family, I'd say. Fun fact about them is they're the most utilized plant family in the world, but they also contain deadly toxins, deadly plants like belladonna, mandrake, tobacco, and capsaicin. So be careful with your nightshades. I've heard don't let your like chickens fluff in the green part of your tomatoes and stuff because they can be the nightshades can be a little toxic. And I wanted to throw the rose family in here too. These are your strawberries, your raspberries, and your blackberries. They're often a little more long-term in the garden. And they are related to the rose, which is why they get that really fragrant smell to them. And they're often coupled with spines to deter herbivores because they're highly edible. So if you just incorporate some of the thinking of what I just said into any part of your garden, it will help with the overall health of future plants and of your garden in the future. Yes.
Do you have to rotate all 6 families, or can you just pick the one that knows the numbers off?
You can do what works for you. Spreading it out is best. You don't have to use all 6 families, but just any sort of intentional thinking about it, you'll be doing yourself a favor.
I think you probably said this already, but so you're talking crop rotation. You're talking rotate a whole family, not just certain plants within that family?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. The members of the same families share a lot of pests and diseases. All right, so when to get started? It depends. There's a lot of limiting factors, especially this time of year for us. Temperature being one of the main limiting factors. So you're just gonna have to start thinking if you're gonna direct seed into your cold outdoor soil or if you're gonna start indoor for later transplanting outside. Either way, I'm gonna give you some tips and tools for timing and how to help make that work for you. First, we'll talk about direct seeding. This is referring to planting seeds directly into the soil of its final maturing place. You're not going to move it. It's there until it's done. Germination of that seed requires adequate temperatures and moisture. Only needs sunlight post-emergence once it has green growth on that seed. The adequate temperatures and it varies depending on what kind of seed you're looking at, and the seed packet you're using will tell you the adequate temperature you need. However, generally, most seeds require a soil temperature above 55 degrees to do their germination. And this is soil temperature. This isn't air temperature. Soil temperature this time of year may be a little warmer than you might think it is. That's when it's a good idea to even get out there with a thermometer and see what you're working with. Again, last hard frost date, April 15th, last soft frost date, May 15th. So we might have a late frost and you know, just got to keep it in mind this time of year. It can be a gamble. Your seed packets will really tell you all of these specifics, the soil depth, soil temperature, spacing, emergence date, how long you can expect to see it after putting it in the ground and watering it, and how long it takes to mature before you can eat it. Here is a list of some direct seeding crops that you can do January, February, March, April. But really, like, again, you want to be pushing your cucumbers, melons into that late May, mid to late May. Indoor seeding, you get quite a bit more flexibility. This is the idea that you're going to be starting your seeds inside with the intent to transplant them later. Some plants do not like this, but they can tolerate it, but will likely thrive with direct seeding. Again, your packet will tell you this. This is because their roots can be a little more sensitive. Germination requires adequate temperature and moisture, sunlight post-emergence, same with indoor ones. So, however, because you can provide the heat and moisture inside your temperature or inside your home a little better than you can outside, sunlight becomes your major limiting factor once it has germinated. You really want to use sterile soil when you're germinating your seeds inside, and that refers to sterile for nutrients and sterile from any weed seeds or fungus mycorrhizae that might be in there. And this will just stop you from setting it off on a bad foot by accidentally introducing something into the system. It also is really light and airy, and seeds really like really light, airy soil to be able to push through because they're very tiny little guys. Because the soil is sterile, you want to keep an eye out for true leaves. So the little seed will push out its first tiny little leaves that kind of look like nothing. All little tiny seeds basically look the same. They'll put out a second set of leaves that are called their true leaves and are maybe a little more identifiable to your eye and look a little different. Those are when they're going to start getting a little hungry, and that's a sign that they need more fertilization or to be repotted up slowly. I have a schedule here for starting your veggies inside. I believe this is a handout we should be able to find here at Shonnard's. And I also have one for the people. This is a slightly different one. This is a really cool one. So that are here, I can send you out with this one. First side is main season crops. So this is the summer season crops. On the back side, it's when to plant early season crops and when to plant fall and winter crops. So it's a really nice breakdown of just about everything. So some tips and tools for early seasoning gardening I'll suggest. Greenhouses, if you can have them, they're really great for increasing humidity and temperature. Both factors needed for adequate germination. This time of year, you can be using soil covers or dark fabrics to help preheat the soil in your ground or raised beds. You might be seeing that in the farms around Corvallis right now, just getting ready to start planting. It's just like a preheat in your oven. It's a little preheat on your growing beds. Now is a really great time to be amending your soils for a desired texture for direct seeding. Like I said, seeds really like a light, fluffy, airy soil. And after a winter-long drenching of rain, soils are getting really compact. So it's a good idea to do some amending or getting in there and help breaking it up. So it gives them a good chance to poke out. Now is also a really great time to be using things like reemay or cloches to help protect from freezes, ice, hard rain, and potential snow. We're supposed to start raining again here soon. A lot of things planted love the rain, get watered in, but too much rain, and you just will physically damage the plant. These are two things we sell here, the harvest guard that you can see, and the cloches. You can also use cut up your milk jugs, and it creates a tiny little greenhouse for your plant. Some useful indoor seed starting supplies you might want to think about getting is our seed starting soil. Again, it's sterile. Seed starting trays, inserts, and domes. This is to help keep them separated, keep them moist. Heating mat help with that desirable temperature. And labels is something I would highly recommend because, like I said, when they're just little tiny babies, a lot of them look a lot alike. And you might be kicking yourself in the later thinking, well, which one's which? I guess we'll just have to plant it and see. It's not the worst thing ever, but. And the lights, which are nice too, if you're going to be doing a lot of seeding indoors. They can get the seeds, like I said, indoor seeding, your biggest issue is providing enough light once they've popped out of germination. They'll tend to get really, really long and really leggy if they don't have enough light. And having grow lights is one way to help prevent that from happening, as we generally want to keep them nice, strong, compact plants.
Yeah. Would you recommend a grow light over just having them by a window that gets a lot of good light?
So windows will work if you can have it like smashed up in there, but you'll even still see them kind of reaching towards the window every day. You might see yourself having to turn it so that it reaches the other way. And those are signs that it's hungry for more light when it's doing that reaching thing. So it's just work with what you got. If you got a window, you can make it work. If you have the ability to include a little light into your seed starting area, your plants will thank you.
Well, I'm also curious because it can get really hot by the
Yeah, that's also a thing with lights too. Sometimes you can set them real close to your little plants, and your plants will maybe grow faster than you intend, and they'll grow right into the light and can burn themselves. So it's something you got to pay attention to either way. If it's getting hot enough in your window to burn them.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking actually. What's the window? The sun coming in the window.
Yeah.
Can get very.
Yeah, this time of year shouldn't be an issue. I wouldn't think middle of summer, or once we actually start getting pretty dang warm, you might maybe be able to pull them away from the window or throw your little starts outside. So how do I plant it? Well, you're gonna have to get dirty. Don't be afraid to push through and fail. I mean, don't be afraid to fail, just push through and you'll be happy about what you are able to accomplish. And if anything, it's a learning experience if you don't get the outcome that you were expecting. We've got a question here on how close the grow lights need to be. I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure.
Most grow lights have instructions on the distance of the light and the color of the light, because now they're multicolored LED lights, so you can have them either red, green, or blue, so you can adjust the color. So they'll recommend certain colors for certain plants at certain times.
Okay.
Okay, so
yeah,
if you're trying to get them to bolt and get a nice hit on it, you'll change the color. And that's frequency of light changes. So
yeah.
And then as they get taller, you gotta make your lights need to be adjustable. I have a greenhouse, so I have lots of lights. I have them all adjustable, so you can raise them or lower. So when they're starting, yeah, you're gonna have them down pretty close to them, maybe 4 inches. But when they get taller, your plant stuff to about 8 inches, you gotta keep raising it up until you're ready to move them outside. Or you keep them in there all year round if you don't get it too hot. That's the bottom with greenhouse during summer.
Yeah.
I learned last year. That's you ought to be able to move them out or shade them. I shaded the whole greenhouse last year.
Yeah.
And it still didn't help all the time. I lost stuff to do with that.
That's a really good point.
The instructions are usually with the grow lights. If not, whoever sells them, usually there's somebody around them.
Thank you very much.
Well,
any other questions? All right. Oh yeah. So a little more about soil preparation. You're gonna wanna try to keep things a little bit clean. This can help reduce pests and diseases by picking up old leaves off the ground, especially if you know they were diseased the year before. Think about tilling in cover crops, paying attention to the timing of cover crops. If you let your cover crops go to flower, they become a weed. Know your soil. Native soils, especially here in the Willamette Valley, have very, very heavy clay. It can lack nutrient availability and drainage. So the really cool thing about our native soils is it has the nutrients in there. It's just locked up tight in the clay and inaccessible to the plants. Raised beds have really great drainage. They can struggle with nutrient density, whether that be not enough or too much. Like if you keep dumping the same fertilizer in there every year and planting the same plant every year, it's going to be maybe a little depleted of one type of nutrient in there that the plant specifically likes, whereas it might have an abundance of too much in another area. Containers are entirely dependent on inputs, what you put in there, growing or soil amendment wise. So amendments is a word we use for the different types of soils we sell here at the Shonnard Center. You can use them to change the qualities of your soil, things like drainage, pH, moisture retention, and nutrients. Whatever your goal is for that soil, there's an amendment to help you get there. I recommend mounding, especially in native clay soils, as it helps increase your drainage. And think about your soil temperatures, whether it's what you're given or if you want to manipulate it a little bit. A little more about native soil versus raised beds. So again, our area high in clay, but really high in nutrients too. Often has too great a moisture retention, so or not enough in the summer. It's just clay, it starts cracking in the summer. In the winter, it's oversaturated. It's very nutrient dense, however, it's locked in by the clay and inaccessible to the plants. This is where you need to add in organic matter. The breaking down of this organic material will help create available bonds between the soil and the plant and the nutrients. The great thing about planting in native soils is there's less temperature fluctuations. It'll take a little longer to warm up, but it'll stay a little longer in the fall. Another really great thing is it has a natural reservoir for water and nutrients of the plants you put in. They're able to scavenge outside the resources of what you give it. So it's able to reach into the surrounding soils, see what it can find. This is a little soil survey off of the NRCS, the Natural Resources Soil Conservation website. There's a link right there, but you can also just Google web soil survey and it'll come up. And you can specifically look into any area and see what the standard soil makeup of that area is. So this is a picture of the Shonnards area, and there's two main clay or soil types here in this area, the Dayton silt loam and the Willamette silt loam. On the website, if you were to click on those, these are both links right there, and it'll tell you much more information about your soil, probably more than you can understand, but it's really, really great. And I've got this little blurb here. If you're interested in learning more about soil, I highly recommend watching our, we did a class with OSU's soil science teacher, James Cassidy. And he talks a lot about soil and how it works, how it's manipulated, and it's really great. The problem with that video is the audio is a little messed up. so it's kind of hard to hear, but if you put the closed captioning on, the subtitles, it makes it a little easier to pay attention. And it's very much worth a look. Raised beds, things to know about them. They will warm up sooner than our native soils. They can tend to struggle with moisture and temperature consistency. It can be completely saturated on the bottom and maybe dry on the top. It's just something you have to think about. They tend to be hungrier and thirstier than our native soils. They don't have that natural, I mean, if you have a closed bottom raised bed, they can kind of scavenge into the native soil below them, but sometimes they're closed off. So they're just, again, given what you give them. We used to have these nice raised beds here. We don't have them anymore. But those were closed bottom ones. They were put on right on the asphalt, or I believe, so they weren't able to scavenge for the native soils around them. So as you're working in your garden, these are some valuable soil amendments I'd like to mention. I'd also like to recommend keeping track of your additives and amendments. Don't always use the same thing, as different plants use different things out of the soil at different rates. This is also the argument for crop rotation. We sell a few different just soils good to grow in, things that'll be great for your containers. Potting soil, blue ribbon blend, seacoast compost. The garden soil and raised bed planting mix is something you can also put into your raised beds to help grow in. A lot of amendments that will help, some soils that you can put in to help create different qualities you're looking for. To help increase drainage or moisture retention. The soil building conditioner is really great. We recommend that a lot here. It's our biggest bag, and it helps with breaking up clay soils. The acid planting mix helps change the pH. This thing is really great for blueberries, azaleas, and rhododendrons that like acid soil. And then the Harvest Supreme is also really great in your vegetable bed, as it's got 15% chicken manure in it, which is a lot of added nitrogen. You can also use things for your pH adjusting. Sulfur lowers pH. Acid planting mix will also lower it. Lime will help raise it. Fertilizers. The three little numbers on the fertilizer bags stand for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and NPK, you might hear it referred to. Fertilizers, they can be plant specific. All-purpose works too, all-purpose. The three I included here are tomato, vegetable, and herb, bud and bloom, and all-purpose are the ones I'd recommend in the vegetable garden, especially the tomato and bud and bloom for your vegetables that you want to bloom repeatedly, like strawberries, squashes. If you're trying to do leafy greens, I maybe would stick with like your all-purpose, as you don't want your leafy greens to flower. That's when it's bolting and no longer delicious. I wanted to talk a little bit about granular versus liquid as well. Granular is a really nice, long-lasting fertilizer. Very consistent. You just throw it in your hole at planting or scrape it into the top of the soil, and it will last like 3 months, just consistently feeding your plant. That liquid is a very quick fertilizer. It's very easily uptaken by the plant, and once it's gone, it's basically gone. So right now, at planting, it's great to use granular, but on our really nice sunny days, because we're not quite as warm as we want it to be, a liquid works really great because it's really easily taken up by the plant. Again, interested in learning more about soil, look us up on our YouTube page. When you're direct seeding, you really want to make sure that your soil is moist and fluffy. Soft soil preferred. Those seeds really need to be able to poke out. Pay attention to your seeding times. Some can handle colder temperatures. Some really like and need that heat. Always read your seeding instructions on your packets. Plant at the appropriate depths and spacing. Keep in mind seed germination rate. It'll say this on the packet, how many you can expect out of a certain set to actually germinate. And then if it's an old seed packet, you can expect that number to get a little worse over the years. You can always overseed and thin later for yummy little sprouts. I love broccoli sprouts. They taste amazing. Better than actual broccoli heads, in my opinion. Be sure to water in your new seedlings. They really need that moisture, and beware of cold snaps. This can kill your seed. It can make it rot. Burying it too deep, this can also rot your seed. Seeding too close, sometimes they can get upset about that. And then germination rate, thinking about thinning as you go if you need to. Indoor seeding and transplanting is kind of a one-two process here. So read your planting instructions on your packets. They often give indoor seeding instructions as well as direct seeding. Start your germination in sterile soil. Once green sprouts appear, provide as much sun and light as possible. They will start to stretch out a little bit indoors if you don't have lights. Once those true leaves appear, nutrients are needed. You can think about transplanting into a slightly bigger pot with potting soil, or think about planting directly into its final growing space. Liquid fertilizer, again, is quick and easy absorbed by the plant, and granular is consistent and nice after transplanting. Buying grown tray packs is easy. I mean, someone's already done the hard germination part for you. There's no shame in that. But be sure to bury your plants close to the soil level at which they are at in the tray packs, or that they poked out of your soil at home. You can put organic granular fertilizer in the hole at planting as well as on top of the soil. Compact the root, make sure the soil is compacted so that the roots touch the soil and supports it. You can always water it in. I said organic granular fertilizer here too, because some stronger things can burn new and delicate plants. So I like the granular organic, especially the stuff we sell, the GB organic stuff. It's not going to burn your plants. All right, maintaining. Getting the plant into the ground is half the battle. Keeping it alive is the real trick. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but also I wanted to shove this what to know about pollinators in here. Get on my little soapbox. Always keep your local pollinators in mind when you're doing anything in the garden, especially chemical application. If you're applying chemicals inappropriately, you can poison birds and bees, or, neighbors stealing out of your vegetable garden. Just when you're growing food, you have a responsibility to make sure that it's not toxic to the wildlife around you. Pollination is required for some producing plants, but not all of them. Being like leafy greens, you don't want them flowering, you don't want them bulking, you don't want them pollinated. Cross-pollination is especially important in squash, melons, and tomatoes. Double, quadruple asterisk is your tomatillos. Tomatillo is kind of like a fruit-producing tree in that it needs 2 different varieties of a tomatillo to produce tomatillos. So if you've been trying tomatillos and you haven't been getting any fruit, this may be your reason why. I I also wanted to include these easy peasy pollinator practices that we can employ in our garden that helps our bees in our area. Surprisingly, one of the main things you can do in your garden to help your pollinators is to do nothing at all. Leave your branches and leaves and your trimmings out as bees can live in there. Don't trim your perennial stems, and if you do, you can leave a good stalk on there. Some bees like to nest inside for the winter. Don't mow where you can, and don't weed where you can. Sometimes just giving them their own area is great. Leave your bare soil alone. Sometimes we can beat ourselves up because there's that part of that garden we've never gotten to and it's just bare soil. Well, make yourself feel a little bit better in knowing that a lot of our native bees are ground nesting bees that need empty bare soil to nest in. To help with these soil nesting bees, you can use drip irrigation. So that you don't flood them out and you just keep the water where you need it on your plants. Native bees love plant native and pollinator plants. Bees go where the food is. So they're gonna find your vegetables really regardless, but it always helps to put a little bit in between, especially things like your melons and your squash. We planted a couple tiny salvia plants in our squash out here and just had an amazing amount of yield. And if you're thinking about the bees, longer term plants in your garden, think about diversity. Different bees like different things. Always follow your chemical directions. Keep your pollinators in mind. And I thought I had a little zoom up on these guys too, because Oregon has so many different kind of native bees. There's not just a honeybee is not native to our area. It's a European honeybee. We have a lot of bumblebees. Bumblebees nest in the ground. We have a lot of sweat bees. We have a lot of bees that look like honeybees. I believe we have over 500 different types of bees in Oregon. So they're a big part of our garden, whether we like it or not. Okay, so weeding is a consistent chore in our garden. Healthy soil means happy plants, which means weeds will want to grow there too. Keep plants and weeds 6 inches away from your fruiting plants that you're trying to eat. It'll help them absorb more water and more fertilizers without competing. Here's some tips on how to minimize weeds. Mulching is really important in the garden. 2 inches thick at least will help block out the light of the seeds of the weeds and will help try to keep them away. I recommend watering at the root zones only or using drip irrigation because this will minimize water availability to the weeds of your bed. It's a good idea to use weed barrier fabric, especially if you really don't want to weed. This again reduces light availability. Consider cover cropping resting soils. You can use different cover crops with different intents. Some can fix nitrogen, the legume ones we talked about earlier. Some can be used to break up compaction. Some can be used to reduce pests and diseases. And some are just great for adding organic material into your soil. You must remove or till them in at the right times to avoid them becoming a weed. And we carry bulk seed and have a cover crop class on our YouTube page if you're interested in learning more about that. I included this picture again because I wanted to tell you about the no-no on it. I told you to water at the base of the plant, but here I am just watering the soil around the plant. I did this for a nice Instagram picture, but when I'm really watering my plants in raised beds, I really get that head of that hose right at the base. Because you can really tell the weed difference once you've cut down from watering your whole bed as a whole to just the root mass that you wanted at. Feeding is incredibly important in the vegetable garden, as we have a very small growing window for things that we want to produce high yields. It's important to use a balanced granular at planting, and that's usually good enough, especially for your leafy greens. Your long season crops that are over 50 days may want a second application of this granular fertilizer. Your early or late plantings can benefit from a liquid in addition to the granular, and your heavy feeders, which is your tomatoes and your squashes and your pumpkins, will also benefit from these liquid applications as well. In the top right corner, I have the all-purpose right next to the organic high growth. The organic high growth is really great for green growth on plants, which is great for your leafy greens. However, it's not as great for things like your tomatoes that you want to be blooming in order to produce lots of tomatoes. Yeah, there we go. Watering needs. This is something you're definitely going to have to think about in our area. Our native soils hold a lot more water than, and will need watered only around 2 or 3 times a week in the dead of summer. Much, much less in spring and fall. We never get rain here in the summer, hardly ever. So you can't be guaranteed, you can't be falling back on that. Different crops and different soils are going to have different water needs. It's just the way it is. There's no one size fits all. I recommend keeping the water off the leaves of your plant. Again, recommending against this overall watering of your garden. Keeping the water off the leaves decreases your chance of disease and physical damage. In our area, we really struggle with like powdery mildew on things, and that's can be caused from an added amount of moisture on the leaves. So you can reduce your chances of getting that by doing that. In addition, our summers are so hot. So when it's 100 degrees out and you're watering all over your plant, you might think you're cooling it down, but really you're adding a bunch of tiny magnifying glasses to the plant and it will burn the plant. Drip irrigation is really, really great idea. It's efficient, can be automated with a timer. You don't have to think about it, set it, forget it. And it's great for the bees. It's great for the weeds. Not great for the weeds. Great for keeping the weeds out. Pests and diseases you're likely going to run into in the vegetable garden. Aphids, slugs, and beetles. Treat as you find them on your plant. There's not a whole lot of prevention that can be done except for maybe for your slugs. Slugs really don't like hazelnut shells, the filbert shells. So if you do a layer of that over top of your plants, they're not going to want to go over that physical barrier. You can also use like copper stripping and stuff to keep the slugs out. Prevention is the best thing, just a crop rotation, think about things, give them adequate food and adequate water, and it'll give the plant a very strong base to be able to fight off issues on its own. We'll often see animal pests in the garden. Here you're gonna have to use physical deterrents, barriers, sprinklers, or bird tape to keep them out. You can also use chemical deterrents. Things like bone meal is very smelly. It smells like a dead animal to them. They don't want to go around. Or capsaicin, which is spicy. So when a deer comes up and takes a bite off that plant, it labels it in its brain that's spicy and it's less likely to come back and give it a taste. This is especially effective on the little ones who are still learning.
Question, are you just putting directly on a plant?
The bone meal or the capsaicin? The bone meal is kind of like a granular spread, so it's kind of an area. The capsaicin, we sell it in a spray deterrent, so that'll go physically on the plant. Diseases you're gonna likely run into, fungal diseases like our powdery mildew. If you can, remove those sick parts as you see them. There's a very short life cycle on powdery mildew. It's about 3 days. So You give it 3 days of sitting there in your garden, it's gonna reproduce and throw out a new generation around. Viral diseases, once you've got a viral disease, it's pretty much over. You're gonna try to get what you can out of your plant, but sometimes it's just a dumpster plant at that point. So you just want to learn about why it happened and try to prevent it in the future. I created this is my own little Venn diagram I created here. This isn't so it's not a foolproof thing, but it gives you a really good idea on the symptoms you might be seeing and what might be causing them. So for pests, you're gonna see possibly webbing, yellow dotting, that sticky dew, tunnel boring holes, white fluff, or even the bugs themselves. Diseases, you're gonna see brown dead tissue, brown streaking through the stems, melting of the plant, white dusting. Environmental issues, these are like physical issues that are like the easiest thing to handle. Legginess, reaching, over under watering, browning on the tips, full browning of the leaf. And you can see the connections, environmental pests, browning tips. It could be either. Smelly soil is another thing I like to point out. We should all know what good soil smells like. It smells just like nice dirt. Bad soil is gonna smell like a dirty sink of dirty dish water that's been sitting there for too long, and you'll know, trust me. That can be either environmental from overwatering, or it could be a disease going through your soil. Hopefully overwatering, you can just lighten up on your watering and it'll fix the issue. Deformed new growth is another really great one to pay attention to. That can be a sign of pests, but it can also be a sign of disease. For all of them, you might see defoliating, wilting, yellowing, stunted new growth, or even death. So, not a foolproof thing, but kind of gives you an idea. We do a lot of diagnostics here at Shonnard's. So you can always bring in a picture. I recommend bringing in a picture and a leaf, and that will help us figure out what's going on with your plant. And so that we can fix it. So next steps, think about your maturity dates. What open space are you gonna have in about 60 days? So what can you look forward to in the next season's crop? Think about your crop rotations and what's available to you in that. For us, it's 60 days from now, it's going to be dead of summer, or not dead of summer, but close to it. What issues did you run into this year in your gardening? Did you have trouble with your consistent watering? Did you have trouble feeding? Or were weeds your #1 problem? How can we address these issues next time? But more importantly, I like to think about looking back at what worked, what harvests you liked, and what did you like about growing it? Because this is what really matters. We really want to be able to enjoy what we're doing, or there's really no point in doing it because we can just go to the store and buy a head of romaine lettuce. So you really got to enjoy what you're doing to make it all worth it. And that's it. I just wanted to say thank you again for joining me. I really appreciated you guys coming in. You can find this video on the YouTube page or find any previous classes.
Yeah, a couple of chat messages.
Oh, thank you. I've heard that tilling destroys soil structures. How balance that with your need to add organic material and break up clay? So yeah, tilling can destroy the soil structures, which can reduce your amount of aeration and pores in the soil. So if you watch the soil video, I really highly recommend it. You find that just as important of soil, like what's in the soil, is like the lacking space of soil. So like the pores in between the soil holds up just as much importance as the soil itself. So that's where this person's worried about, is breaking up those pores. And this will increase compaction and decrease availability of water and nutrients to the plant. That's a totally valid idea to be worried about. Some gardens like to employ a no-tilling kind of rule in their garden where they just won't ever hit it with the tillage. You can balance that with adding the need to add organic material by using the cover crops, I'd recommend. So if you're really struggling with compaction, you can use a soil or a cover crop that will have giant roots. It'll grow really deep into the soil, creating much of those pore spaces. And then you can just cut the head off, take out the top part of it, and leave the roots to decay in the soil. And as those roots decay, it leaves behind all that empty space behind it. So it's kind of like an organic way of tilling, I guess. I mean, tilling is organic, but if that makes sense. I really bumbled my way through that, so I would highly recommend watching the soil science video. It is incredibly interesting, and he's a really entertaining host. Did that make sense, or did that bring up any other question? All right.